was not a time of peace. It was a kingdom of ice and shadow, a battleground forged in millennia of frost. In this land of monsters, to live was to wage war, and to survive was to claim a throne. But all thrones are built on bones, and every dynasty is destined for a tragic fall. Now, let the chronicle of this lost ruler begin. The land itself was a monument to hardship, an empire of gleaming, indifferent ice. Glaciers, miles high, advanced and retreated like the breath of sleeping titans, carving valleys that became arenas and mountains that became tombs. This was the world before history, a brutal chronicle written in fang and frost. Life here did not flourish, it endured. It clung to the edges of the great ice sheets, a desperate, violent drama playing out in the grey half-light of an endless winter. This was the great stage for a forgotten tragedy. The air, thin and sharp, carried the scent of blood and pine across frozen plains. Here, power was the only law, and hunger was the only truth. The great herds, bison, horse, and mammoth, were the prize, the living currency of survival. Their migration was the pulse of this frozen heart. And where the herds moved, the hunters followed. This was a kingdom of contenders, a mosaic of territories held by tooth, claw, and desperate strategy. The air hummed with the tension of contested kills and stolen sustenance. Sabertooth and lion, wolf and hyena, all vied for supremacy in this fractured dominion. Each held a piece of the throne, but none held it all. The land was a brutal aristocracy, not a monarchy. But this age of fractured power was nearing its end. The kingdom, vast and terrible, was awaiting a new philosophy. A shadow was stretching, a presence so absolute. It would, for a time, challenge the very concept of a rival. Into this fractured kingdom, a new power emerged. It did not rise from the ranks, it simply arrived. This was a force of singular, terrifying scale, a presence that dwarfed all other contenders. It was Artodosimus, the short-faced bear. But this was not merely an animal. This was a philosophy of absolute power, made flesh. This was the Tyrant. When we look at its remains, it stood taller than any predator the land had known, a giant that could look a mammoth in the eye. Its long, powerful limbs were not the tools of a sprinter, but the pillars of a monarch. It did not run. It strode across its domain, an unstoppable force patrolling its vast, frozen estate. Its gaze was a judgment, its shadow a verdict. Its very design was a statement of intent. Its very design was a statement of intent. The short, broad muzzle was not the delicate instrument of a selective hunter. It was a weapon of blunt appropriation, built to inhale scent from miles away, to find conflict, and to end it. The tyrant's strength was not in the chase, but in the arrival. It did not steal. It conquered. It did not scavenge. It reigned.
Its method was a brutal, efficient coronation, repeated daily. The tyrant's era was one of fear. From its high vantage, it would watch the lesser rulers, the lions, the saber-tooths, even the wolves, wage their desperate wars for sustenance. It would wait, a patient, looming shadow, until the kill was made. There was no battle. There was no negotiation. Its immense form, silhouetted against the gray sky, was enough. The hunters, who had just spent their strength to secure their future, would scatter. Like subjects fleeing a wrathful god. They could not fight this.
To challenge the tyrant was to challenge the ice itself, a force of nature so absolute it rendered courage meaningless.
Tyrant would stand over the prize, and consume it. This was its tax. This was its tithe. This was the foundation of its throne. In this land of monsters, a new dynasty had begun. A dynasty of one. The tyrant's shadow fell long across the ice, and its dominion seemed unassailable. In this kingdom, no throne is secure. But the tyrant's shadow, though long, did not fall upon an empty land. Its philosophy of singular power was an invasion, an affront to a dominion
that had held the ice for 100,000 years before its arrival. a living, breathing, and deeply intelligent empire of teeth and sinew.
This was the Canis Dominion.
If the short-faced bear was a tyrant, the dire wolves were a legion. Their philosophy was not built on the brute force of the individual, but on the terrifying, unified strength of the pack.
They were the true architects of the hunt, a dynasty that spanned the continent.
A web of territories bound by loyalty and a collective, strategic mind.
They were not the largest, nor the strongest, one by one, but they were, together, the most efficient. Their power was a symphony of endurance and calculation. A single wolf was a contender. A pack was a force of nature, an army with a shared consciousness. Their throne was the open plain, their scepter the relentless, miles-long chase. They were the masters of attrition, the thinkers in this land of monsters. While the tyrant waited for war to end, the wolves were the war. A flowing, intelligent tide that isolated the weak, the old, the unfortunate, and dismantled them with strategic precision. A howl in the frozen dusk was not a plea. It was a decree, a redrawing of boundaries, a roll call for the legionaries. They held their dominion not through fear, but through presence. They were everywhere. The tyrant's arrival was, at first, a disruption. When the great shadow fell upon their kill, the pack would yield. They were strategists, not martyrs. They would back away, 100 golden eyes watching from the frost, a low growl rippling through their ranks.
They gave up the carcass, but they never considered the throne. They watched. They learned. They saw this new god bleed when it snagged its flank on a rock. They smelled its exhaustion on the wind after a long patrol. They saw the tyrant not as a deity, but as a problem. And the pack was a machine for solving problems. This was the great conflict of the era, a quiet war of philosophies that simmered across the icy plains. The tyrant's singular, absolute power against the pack's collective, unbreakable will. The tyrant could steal a single meal, but it could not break the dynasty. Every kill it claimed was an insult. Every time the wolves retreated, their resentment and their strategic understanding grew. The tension was a razor's edge. The land could not support two such dominions. A Tyrant's philosophy demanded that all sustenance was its own, by right of might. The pack's philosophy declared that what was earned by the collective belonged to the collective. These two truths could not coexist. The stage was set for a final, fateful clash, not over a single carcass,